There are some facts that your history teacher never dared to tell you. Most modern Northern published history textbook tells you that the war, the so-called Civil War, was fought to end slavery. But is this really the fact? Slavery was merely a smokescreen behind which the Federal Empire hid its naked aggression and invasion of a sovereign nation, the Confederate States of America. Slavery was merely a justification used by the Federal Empire to invade the South. Why? The invasion was over money and desire for the empire to maintain its control over the southern states. The reason? Prior to the war, the South furnished 75% of the revenue necessary to support the Federal Empire. This support went for internal improvements that benefited the commercial and political parts of the North. The South had in fact become the North's cash cow. Senator Thomas Benton of Missouri, who happened to be opposed to slavery, noted as much in 1828 in a speech in the House and the Senate. The Northern newspapers in 1861 also noticed this. The New Hampshire Union Democrat, for instance, said, quote, "The South gains and we lose. No, we must not let the South go." The invasion and conquest of the South by the Northern armies destroyed our economy. It impoverished the South, but it must be remembered that there was no mass poverty in the South prior to the Federal Empire's invasion, occupation, and conquest of the Confederate States of America. As a result of the war, over 10,000 miles of Southern railroad tracks were destroyed. Over $2 billion worth of Southern property was destroyed. That's $2 billion in 1860 dollars. Today, that would be almost $30 billion of destruction. Poverty became the South's inheritance in our reunited country. The North became prosperous post-war. The South was plunged into poverty. Around 75% of the white Southern population prior to the war were not part of the plantation system. Their primary economic enterprise was not as farmers, but as herdsmen with hogs and cattle roaming the South's open range. This happy and leisurely lifestyle was destroyed by invasion, by war, and by Reconstruction. To survive post-war, over 8.5 million Southerners, white and black, became sharecroppers, a form of debt peonage enforced by the law of contracts. Over 66% of these sharecropping slaves were white. Prior to the war, an average plantation had 5 slave families working the plantation. After the war, the large landowners had 5 white and black sharecroppers working not the plantation, but now the large landowner's property. Post-war and Reconstruction became an era of slavery post-war and a slavery of sharecropping. Sharecroppers were bound to the land by a system of debt contracts in which the interest rate on these contracts went from 50 to 125%. The sharecropper slave lived a nomadic life. They were not landowners. They were essentially homeless, and they depended upon the good graces of the landowner in order to keep a roof over their head. As late as 1938, the cost of annual migration of these sharecroppers across the South, moving from one landowner's land to another landowner's land, cost approximately $25 million each year. And this cost had to be paid by these impoverished sharecroppers. Malnutrition also became a major problem in the South up to the 1930s. Here are two photographs of sharecroppers in the South, white and black families. You can see their poverty. This is some 70 years after the North's glorious victory in the War for Southern Independence. One can only question, with liberty and justice for all? Not if you're Southern. The system of sharecropping slavery was not freely chosen. No, it was forced upon the South by our conquering masters of the Federal Empire. The abolition of sharecropping slavery occurred the same peaceful way that chattel slavery could have been eliminated, peacefully through mechanization. But even this mechanization in sharecropping slavery came to the South very slowly. Because the South was so poor, the Southern farmers could not afford to mechanize as the grain growers did in the West. The Federal Empire made no plans to provide freed slaves with a viable economic alternative, a way to support themselves once chattel slavery was abolished. The Federal Empire's purpose for invading the Confederate States of America was not to free slaves, but to maintain their economic dominance, control, and continued exploitation of the Southern people. The people of the South fought the war for Southern independence to prevent becoming the political, social, and economic slaves to the Federal Empire. Justice demands that the truth be known.
Every cultural and ethnic group in America today is encouraged to display pride in their heritage, except Southerners. Sadly, the heritage and rights of Southerners have been relegated to the trash heap of liberal PC society. Justice requires equality and fair play for the South. After all, Southern rights matter. We insist on justice for all Southerners who wore the gray, black or white, during the War for Southern Independence, and justice for their descendants. The Sons of Confederate Veterans is a non-political Southern heritage organization defending the good name of all honorable Southerners. Check out our website and join us in this noble endeavor.